My name is Eli Mercer, and the calm routine of my life as a civil engineer came crashing down the day my wife, Asha, a cardiothoracic surgeon, was nearly stopped from saving someone's life by our HOA president, Karen Delaney, all because of a petty parking infraction. The morning everything changed didn't erupt in chaos. It creaked into disaster with a groan from our garage door. It froze halfway open, moaning like some mechanical beast in its death throes, effectively trapping Asha's sleek car inside. Asha, composed, razor-focused, is the kind of surgeon who can stay steady under pressure, even as the world around her unravels. That day she got the call. Code Crimson at Central Memorial, severe cardiac failure. She was first assist, which meant she'd be wrist-deep in an open chest cavity within the hour. No time for delays, no room for broken hardware. "Eli, the door!" she called from the garage, her voice clipped and urgent, that unmistakable surgical tone I knew too well. "I need to leave, right now!" "It's stuck!" I yelled back, struggling with the rigid door, straining to lift it manually. The motor gave a strained whine. "Forget it, we're taking mine." I snatched my keys, already heading out, mentally mapping the fastest route to the hospital, factoring in morning traffic. I quickly reversed my SUV and parked it at the curb in front of our house. Just temporarily, I figured. Sure, the Maple Hollow Homeowners Association had endless rules, dozens of pages dictating everything from the height of your hedges to the shade of your mailbox, all designed to preserve the pristine suburban illusion. But I'd never had a problem before, and if anyone would understand a true emergency, it had to be Karen Delaney, our HOA president. Karen, always perfectly styled, her blonde bob never out of place, her smile sharp as glass. She liked to promote herself as reasonable and just, especially in public. I couldn't have been more mistaken. Barely 90 minutes passed, and the garage door was still frozen in place, mocking every half-hearted fix I tried. I stepped outside to retrieve my laptop bag from the SUV, needing files for a last-minute virtual meeting. The sun was shining, birds were chirping, leaves rustled in a soft breeze. Maple Ridge Lane was its usual serene self. Until I blinked, then blinked again. My SUV, gone. Just vanished. Like a bad illusion. No note, no friendly heads-up, no warning tag on the windshield. Nothing but bare curb and a single tire smear on the asphalt to prove it had ever been there. A cold lump settled in my stomach. Dread. Full-bodied and sharp. I ran to the corner, my pulse thudding against my ribs. I was just in time to spot it. My car, rear wheels lifted off the ground, being winched onto a private tow truck. A polished steel hook clamped under the chassis. The tow rig groaned, the only noise shattering the peaceful morning. A mechanical beast hauling away its catch. "Hey, that's my car!" I shouted, my voice hoarse with disbelief, a rising wave of fury tightening my chest. I sprinted toward it, my breath catching, but the truck had already turned the corner, speeding off. My vehicle, held hostage, slipped from view like a ghost. And then I saw her, Karen Delaney, standing smugly across the street, arms folded neatly over her salmon-pink blouse, beige trousers immaculate. Her sunglasses reflected the sun, her stance like a statue judging the unworthy. Her face was calm. Too calm, tinged with the kind of satisfaction that made your skin crawl. It was like she'd choreographed this whole spectacle. "You violated the front setback guideline, Mr. Mercer," she stated, voice cutting through the air like a reprimand from a strict teacher. "It disrupts visual flow, as stated in the handbook, page 7. Very clearly, no vehicle may be positioned in a way that distorts the aesthetic sightline of the front setback. Your SUV, unfortunately, did exactly that. Without authorization." I stood stunned, my brain stuttering at the ridiculous logic. "Karen, my wife's in surgery, right now. It's a code crimson, emergency. The garage was jammed. Her car couldn't get out. I parked there just for the crisis. I was going to move it this afternoon when the repair crew arrived." "This is a life-or-death exception!" Karen flicked her hand dismissively, her manicured fingers catching the light. Her glasses concealed her expression. "Intent does not affect enforcement, Mr. Mercer. Rules are rules. And claiming you didn't know the bylaws doesn't excuse the breach. Every homeowner gets a copy and signs acknowledgement. They apply equally to all. This is not negotiable. It's contractual." She allowed herself a smug flicker of a smile. We must uphold community standards. It felt like I'd been struck, a crushing weight landing on my chest. My throat closed. I stood powerless, watching the truck disappear, taking with it not just our only transportation, but Asha's insurance documents, critical post-op paperwork, even her personal surgical tools, her stethoscope, her magnification glasses. Even a short delay could be disastrous. The thought of her needing something crucial mid-surgery and not having it, it chilled me. "Karen," I said, forcing calm into my voice, trying to cut through her self-satisfied veneer. "Do you understand what's actually happening right now? This isn't about where I parked. It's about someone's life." "This was a medical emergency!" She responded with a tight smile, gaze drifting toward a neatly trimmed hedge as if the greenery mattered more. "If we start allowing chaos, Mr. Mercer, it sets a precedent. And then where's Maple Hollow headed? Disorder, disrespect. We enforce the code equally for everyone's sake. It's about fairness, not individual needs." She smoothed her blouse, readjusted her glasses like she'd just delivered a moral lecture. "Our peace relies on discipline." On the other side of the city, sealed inside the cold, focused quiet of Central Memorial Hospital, Asha remained entirely unaware of the drama unfolding back home, of the citations, the towing, the confrontation. Her world in that moment was sterile, clinical, and entirely consumed by the life in front of her. She was scrubbed into the elbows, her surgical gloves pulled tight, a surgical mask secured across her face. The hum of machines surrounded her, beeping in steady rhythm with the fragile, wavering heartbeat on the monitor beside her. Doctor. Eleanor Vance, Asha's supervising surgeon, brilliant, demanding, and notoriously no-nonsense, had done something she rarely did, stepped aside. "You've got this," she had said, voice calm but resolute, handing full control of the procedure over to Asha. It was a gesture of respect, not just trust in her skill, but acknowledgement of her capability. The pressure was immense. The patient on the table had already coded once in the ER. Major cardiac failure. No time for hesitation. No margin for error. The identity of the patient had been kept confidential. The hospital had flagged him as a VIP but didn't release a name. It didn't matter. Not to Asha. They were all lives, all sacred, all worth saving. She moved with grace born of habit, posture steady, arms positioned just so as she worked her way toward a critical grafting point in the bypass. Then, just before committing to the vein placement, she reached instinctively to double-check the file. One last time. Standard protocol, drug allergies, valve measurements. And that's when she saw it, printed in crisp, unmissable black letters across the chart. Gregory Delaney. A sudden stillness came over her. Her breath caught at the back of her throat, a subtle hitch. Her hands, trained for stillness, paused mid-air for the briefest moment. Karen's husband. The realization hit like a splash of cold water, and yet she didn't react. Not outwardly, not with a twitch or flinch. No one else in the operating room even noticed the microsecond delay. Her gaze steadied, her breathing slowed. Her hands moved forward again, precise and fluid, as if nothing had shifted. Because inside that room, it didn't matter who he was married to. He was a patient. A man whose chest was open, whose heartbeat was faltering, whose life now hung in the balance between Asha's fingers and the cold edge of a scalpel. All thoughts of Karen, her smugness, her threats, her petty power plays, were locked away, buried under layers of focus, professionalism, and a deep, immovable code of ethics. She could not afford a single stray thought. She blocked it all out, the open sternum, the damaged heart muscle, the fraying rhythm. That was her entire world now. Meanwhile, back at home, I was pacing the kitchen like a prisoner in a cell, a phone wedged between my shoulder and ear, stuck in an endless loop of recorded instructions. The impound lot's automated message played for the 5th time in a row. Your vehicle has been towed under the jurisdiction of Maple Hollow HOA. Total recovery fees are $740. Credit card required. Please have valid photo ID ready upon pickup. Our office does not mediate homeowner disputes. Thank you. It sounded less like a helpline and more like a warning. The robotic tone grated against my skull. Every repeat of the message felt like a slap. I stood staring out the front window at the space where my SUV had been. Empty curb, faint tread marks, nothing else. Then I heard it, the light slap of paper on wood. A white envelope had been hand-delivered onto our front porch. I hadn't seen anyone approach. No footsteps, no knock. Just the sound of bureaucracy arriving with cruel timing. Likely one of Karen's teenage minions, clipboard in hand, walkie-talkie buzzing with HOA chatter, had dropped it and slipped away. It wasn't a bill. It was a citation. Fine, $350. The letter was printed on heavy, watermarked HOA stationery. Fancy embossing. Karen's name scrawled with a dramatic flourish at the bottom, like a declaration of war. Attached was a note, brief, clinical, threatening in its coldness. Repeat violations will activate lien enforcement. This is your final notice. We uphold our regulations without exception. I stood frozen, holding the envelope in one hand, staring at the space where the car had been. The very car that held Asha's surgical gear, her insurance paperwork, her credentials. The car we'd needed in that moment. The one Karen had taken, knowing full well what my wife did for a living. Knowing we were in crisis, knowing it was an emergency. She had it removed not out of safety or necessity or community interest. She'd done it because she could, because it gave her a sense of power, because she wanted to remind us who was in charge. Something inside me gave way. A wire, a fuse, a thin emotional thread. It snapped. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything, but a storm was building behind my eyes. I grabbed the spare keys to Asha's other car, the smaller, less used sedan, and backed out of the driveway in tense, jerky motions. The steering wheel felt foreign in my hands, my breathing shallow. The street stretched out in front of me like a corridor in a nightmare. As I drove, the silence inside the car became unbearable, like pressure building in a sealed chamber. Then my phone vibrated on the passenger seat. It was Asha. I answered on speaker. Her voice came through steady, but there was something in it. Disbelief, maybe, or the thin residue of adrenaline after surviving something unthinkable. "Eli?" she said quietly. "You're not going to believe whose life I just saved. We just finished. He's stable now. Barely. It was that close." Something in me tightened. A cold, sinking sensation spreading through my stomach like ink in water. My throat went dry. I stared at the road in front of me, but all I could see was Karen's face, her smirk, her crossed arms, her clipboard, her satisfaction as the tow truck drove off. My voice was barely above a whisper. "Please, don't say it. Don't tell me it was who I think it was." A pause, and then came the confirmation I already knew was coming. It was. I picked her up outside the hospital's main doors as the sun began its descent. Long, golden shadows stretched across the pavement. Her scrubs bore the faint traces of blood, dried now, but evidence of hours spent fighting for a life. She looked utterly spent, yet adrenaline still buzzed beneath her skin. That glow only surgeons knew, the rush of narrowly pulling someone back from the edge. She sank into the passenger seat, buckled in, and spoke before meeting my eyes. Her tone was distant, mechanical. "Greg Delaney, triple bypass. If we'd started 15 minutes later, he wouldn't have made it. The whole team was phenomenal." The entire drive back home, I said nothing, not because I was shocked, but because I was barely containing the fury bubbling in my chest. I didn't want to picture what could have happened, how close we came to Greg dying on that table because Karen decided to be petty. Her smug, composed face kept flashing through my mind. It made me sick. Later that night, once Asha had drifted off to sleep and the house was hushed except for the low hum of the fridge, I pulled out the HOA handbook. I flipped to the page Karen had quoted. Page 7, the infamous front setback rule. But as I kept reading, something else jumped out. Page 10, bolded, clear, an exemption carved out specifically for medical emergencies. It stated that during an unforeseen health crisis requiring immediate response, vehicles could be parked temporarily, without penalty. I took a screenshot instantly. Then I went hunting for more. I checked the footage from my neighbor's doorbell cam across the street. I fast-forwarded through the feed until I found the exact moment the tow truck rolled in. There it was, my SUV getting latched, and Karen standing nearby, arms crossed, watching it all. And then, that look. That little cold smirk, a gleam of satisfaction like a predator savoring a catch. I compiled both pieces of evidence, the handbook exemption and the time-stamped video, and emailed them to the entire HOA board. No emotional appeals, no accusations, just a subject line as sharp and cold as steel. Violation of emergency clause, action requested. I copied Karen directly, sending it to her HOA inbox. There was no reply that night, none the following morning, only silence. The kind that didn't feel passive, but calculated, a quiet refusal to acknowledge wrongdoing. 2 days passed. As I returned from another exhausting virtual meeting, pulling into the driveway just as dusk settled over the neighborhood, I saw it. Another envelope, taped to our front door. Heavy cardstock, embossed with the HOA insignia. It wasn't a fee notice, it wasn't a warning, it was a second formal citation. Violation, harassment of HOA official via digital correspondence. Fine, $500. Beneath it in red ink, someone had scrawled, "Cease and desist. Further contact may result in legal escalation." My hands trembled. My eyesight went blurry again, not from confusion this time, but from the blaze of fury rushing through me. This wasn't enforcement. It was provocation. She wanted me to react, to lose control in public, to validate her image of me as unhinged. I slammed the car door with enough force to shake the street, stormed across the road. My fists hammered on Karen's front door, once, then again, harder. The wood shook beneath the blows. She opened quickly, already in her flawless yoga attire. Calm, collected, that glint of smugness in her eyes, as if she'd been waiting behind the door, rehearsing for this confrontation. "Can I help you, Mr. Mercer?" she said smoothly, her tone clipped, professional, and oozing condescension. "You violated your own rules," I growled, keeping my tone barely in check as I held out the highlighted documents. Page 10, medical emergency exception. It's right there, black and white. Temporary parking is allowed in health crises. She didn't even bother looking at the papers, just folded her arms, her smirk widening. "Exemptions require prior approval from the board," she said, her voice sugar-coated with malice. "You didn't submit the emergency form beforehand. That's covered in Appendix C, Section 4, Subclause B. These aren't suggestions, Mr. Mercer. They're legal protections, and you've been growing increasingly hostile." "My wife was operating on your husband," I shouted, the words breaking from me like a dam bursting. "She nearly didn't make it because of your ridiculous vendetta. You jeopardized his life. For what? A curb?" Karen tilted her head slightly, amused. "And yet, she saved him, didn't she?" Her voice dripped with false sweetness. "Quite the surgeon, really. Even if her arrival was a bit unconventional." She gave me a slow wink. I couldn't believe it. Her tone, her indifference. She didn't even care that her husband almost died. "You endangered Greg's life, Karen," I whispered, my voice trembling with contained rage. "For a parking regulation. You knew what was happening. You knew it was urgent. You just didn't care. You're morally hollow." Her eyes narrowed. The sweetness vanished. "Now you're threatening me on my doorstep?" she hissed, her voice sharpening. "Your behavior is unstable, Mr. Mercer. It's also a violation of respectful HOA conduct. Keep this up, and I'll pursue legal protection. This is your warning." Then she said the line, the one that revealed exactly who she truly was. Her eyes locked on mine, ice-cold and merciless. "You're not getting special treatment just because your wife struts around with a god complex and a white coat. No one is above the HOA in Maple Hollow." I took an involuntary step back. Her venomous words hit like a slap. I turned without a word and walked away. Because she was baiting me. She wanted an outburst. She wanted a scene. But I wasn't giving it to her. Not yet. That time would come. Others were beginning to see through her. Over at the hospital, Greg Delaney was recovering well. The nurses loved him. Kind, respectful, surprisingly chatty for someone recovering from major surgery. Too chatty, in fact. Greg had charisma, the kind that made people talk back. The polar opposite of his cold, icy wife. He asked about their shifts, their families, their hobbies. He was healing and bored. One evening, as Asha was reviewing post-op files, a senior nurse named Beverly pulled her aside. Beverly was seasoned, blunt, and fiercely fair. "Dr. Mercer," she said softly, glancing around like she was sharing state secrets. "You should know. Greg keeps asking about you. Specifically if you're seeing someone. He seems to think you're single. Asha blinked. What? I'm married. Eli's my husband. He picked me up after surgery. He doesn't seem to know that, Beverly muttered, leaning closer. And he has no clue your car was towed, or that you had to take your husband's sedan. He's been telling everyone you just appeared like a miracle right when he needed saving. Apparently, Karen hadn't told him anything. Not about the garage, not about the tow, not about why Asha almost didn't make it. Greg genuinely believed his wife's drama-free version, that a lone surgeon arrived just in time to save his life. He didn't know the truth, not yet. The following day, still weak but regaining energy, Greg asked to meet privately with his attending physician, Dr. Vance. As required, Asha joined the meeting. It began with the standard recovery updates, vitals, lab results, post-op metrics, but Greg quickly veered the conversation elsewhere. He began asking about Asha's commute that morning, about the difficulty of responding to an emergency call. When he learned Asha had performed his surgery, and that she only arrived at the hospital on time because she took my SUV after hers was towed over a parking technicality, his expression darkened. He wanted answers, real ones. He turned to Dr. Vance and pressed harder, his questions insistent. Recognizing the weight of the situation, Dr. Vance chose to be fully transparent. The nurses, fed up with Karen's interference and sensing a shift in momentum, supported the disclosure. They laid it all out. Every exasperating detail, from Karen's heartless remarks to her complete disregard for the urgency of the situation, all the way down to the medical emergency exemption clearly written in the HOA handbook. At home, I sat hunched over another $500 notice, trying to navigate the legal labyrinth of the HOA's dense regulations and figuring out how to respond next. Then my phone rang. It was Greg. Though his voice still carried traces of post-op exhaustion, it was underpinned with restrained rage. No longer just curiosity. Mr. Mercer, this is Greg Delaney. I just had a very enlightening conversation with Dr. Vance, and your wife's surgical team, and the nurses. I owe both of you far more than gratitude. In fact, I owe you a public apology. We need to talk, in person. Now. Can you come to the hospital? He sounded shaken to the core. I agreed immediately. He asked me to bring everything. All the citations, the HOA manual, email threads, every shred of proof I had. When I arrived, Greg pored over the documents page by page. His eyes narrowed, brow creasing deeper as he read. He asked question after question, each one tighter than the last. She knew it was an emergency? That Asha was operating on me? And she still went through with it? And then fined you for questioning it? He paused when he got to the $1,200 fine, then again at the $500 citation for so-called harassment. Silence settled between us, broken only by the soft, steady beep of his monitor. He sat still, pale, processing the scale of what his wife had done. Finally, he looked up at me, eyes blazing, a vein pulsing at his temple. She risked my life. Over a parking spot? He rasped, disbelieving. She actually did that? And then pretended everything was normal? I gave a slow nod, watching the weight of the truth land squarely on his shoulders. No warning, no call, and when we tried to address it, she slapped us with fines. She even mocked Asha, said she had a god complex. She claimed it was about precedent and order. Greg clenched his jaw so tight I could hear the pressure in his teeth. This man had just survived open-heart surgery, but the anger boiling inside him now was enough to power a generator. I sit on the HOA finance committee, he muttered. I've seen her spending, her enforcement patterns. I always thought she was just intense, overbearing maybe, but I never imagined this. I thought it was politics, trying to maintain control. I even backed her on small disputes. I thought she was just thorough. He stopped, his gaze distant, as if seeing his wife clearly for the first time. All the illusions had shattered. But this is evil. And by standing by, I let it happen. I didn't act. Then something changed in his face. The softness vanished, replaced by focus, determination. He reached for his phone, fingers trembling slightly but steady with intent. She's going to regret this, I swear it. And I'm going to make sure she does. This isn't about the HOA anymore. It's about everything. 2 days later, I spotted Karen at the community mailbox hub. She had her back to me, humming as she sorted flyers and letters with surgical precision. When she turned and saw me, she flashed her trademark plastic grin, clipboard in hand. "Greg's recovering nicely, thank you for asking," she said sweetly, dripping sarcasm, clearly expecting me to pretend we were cordial. It was a subtle form of control, a power play masked as neighborly banter. I didn't say a word, I just stared. Silence, sharpened by her own methods, had become my weapon of choice. She hesitated. Her smile twitched, faltered. Her stance shifted. "Something wrong, Mr. Mercer? You're looking rather pale. The stress getting to you, perhaps? Those citations can add up." "Greg knows," I said quietly, each syllable slicing the air like a scalpel. Color drained from her face. Her clipboard slipped from her fingers, scattering papers like brittle leaves in the wind. Her eyes widened, stunned, not with guilt, but with naked panic. She looked around wildly, scanning for cameras, witnesses, anything that might reveal what else I knew. Her whole frame stiffened. For the first time since I'd moved to Maple Hollow, I watched Karen Delaney actually step back. Stumble even. Her composure, always so ironclad, cracked. The queen of this pristine little kingdom was suddenly just a frightened woman, and she knew it. That night, Asha checked her inbox while winding down for the evening, scanning hospital updates and patient logs. Then she paused, brows lifting at a subject line that stood out from the clutter. It was anonymous, from someone on the HOA board. Subject: "You need to see this. Urgent. From the HOA archives. They're deleting everything." Attached was a PDF. An email, one Karen had sent to Latchman Recovery Services. The subject? "Make it disappear fast. She'll never know." The contents changed everything. Karen hadn't simply reacted when she saw our SUV parked out front. She'd planned the tow in advance, hours before we ever left the driveway. Before Asha received her emergency call, the email referenced spotting our garage malfunction the night before. It included a photo of the door stuck halfway. Karen had anticipated we'd need to leave one car out, and she planned retaliation before it even happened. The recipient, Latchman Recovery Services, no city contract, known for shady repos, not a registered HOA vendor. The message listed the make and model of my SUV. It gave a precise time for pickup. It instructed them to keep it discreet and deniable. The file also included other invoices from similar secretive tows, all linked to homes Karen had publicly clashed with. She didn't enforce a rule. She plotted a trap, a punishment. It wasn't policy. It was personal. The next morning, I showed Greg the email. He was sitting up in his recliner, IV still taped to his arm. As he read, his expression twisted. He stared at the bold subject line for a long time. His skin paled, then turned crimson. "She did this before surgery?" he asked, his voice faint. "She knew I'd be on that table. And still pulled this? She targeted you because she expected a problem? Not because one even happened yet?" I nodded. "She used the HOA as a weapon, not to maintain order, to punish. She even used shady funds. Latchman isn't on any official vendor list." Greg leaned back slowly, placing a hand over his healing chest. His breathing hitched. "I didn't want to be on the HOA board. She said it looked good, symbolic. Said it would show the community we were united. I supported her because I thought she was just a little extreme. I never imagined this. The lies, the manipulation, the theft." He went quiet. You could see the moment his perception of her shattered into dust. Then, slowly, Greg stood, dragging his IV pole beside him. The hospital monitors beeped softly behind him. But he looked stronger now, steadier. "I'm going to fix this, Eli, every piece of it, for Asha, for the neighborhood, for me. I'm done standing by. She won't get away with this." His next step wasn't loud, but it shook the foundation of the HOA. He called an emergency finance committee session, the same committee he had a seat on. That gave him authority, access, and presence. He walked in prepared. He presented Asha's story in full, complete with page numbers, email printouts, timestamps, and a damning chain of events. He didn't name Karen at first. He let the evidence do the talking. Board members exchanged glances, pale faces, stunned silence. 3 immediately voted to reopen an ethics investigation. Two abstained, eyes downcast, clearly rattled but not ready to confront Karen outright. The room felt tight, suffocating, the weight of complicity thick in the air. Greg made note of every name, every silence. Then Greg crossed a line no one expected. He formally filed a grievance, not against the HOA president, but directly against Karen Delaney, his wife. The allegations were serious: conflict of interest, ethical misconduct, reckless endangerment, intentional abuse of power, and misappropriation of HOA resources for unauthorized activities. He even submitted photos of fictitious invoices from a landscaping service that didn't exist, evidence he'd quietly gathered during his own private audit. He signed the report in front of the entire finance committee, his signature more than ink. It was a statement, a break, a public severance from the toxic world Karen had built. Her retaliation was immediate, brutal, deranged. By sunrise, the entire neighborhood had been peppered with glossy, professionally made lawn signs. They appeared like weeds on the lawns of her loyalists and even on neutral properties, delivered under cover of darkness with calculated precision. Doctor's wife wants special parking, and you pay for it. Fight back, say no to privilege and yes to fairness. Is your HOA president under attack? Stop the sabotage. Later that day, a Facebook group materialized, Maple Hollow for Fairness. It was a cesspool, a digital war zone full of twisted half-truths attacking Asha, me, and Greg. He was described, never by name, as a confused committee member who'd been led astray by outsiders and blinded by elite influence. We were made the villains. And Karen was busy fanning the flames using every HOA channel and manipulation tactic she'd perfected over the years. But the narrative was slipping through her fingers. Greg wasn't finished. Not even close. A week later, he walked into the full HOA board meeting, a larger, more official gathering held in the community clubhouse. He didn't show up with signs. He arrived with a binder, thick, structured, devastating. Inside, every piece of documentation imaginable. Emails, financial statements, screenshots, a chronological breakdown of Karen's misconduct. Among the evidence, archived emails Karen had deleted from the HOA server, but Greg had quietly saved. They revealed attempts to intimidate dissenters, issue fines without approval, and use HOA funds for personal gains, like her extravagant HOA president's annual gala, which had been nothing more than a backyard soiree funded by residents. Off-the-books fines never officially recorded, their payments redirected to unapproved parties or private accounts. Residents fined for lawn gnomes and loud bird feeders, and the money never reaching HOA ledgers. Budget reimbursements rubber-stamped without receipts, just Karen's signature. Absurd expenditures labeled community morale projects, like a Unity fountain that turned out to be her new patio feature. And finally, the Latchman recovery email, printed in full, large font boldness, the blueprint of her malice, followed by other secret tow invoices she'd commissioned in total secrecy. Greg didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He laid it all out like an architect presenting a blueprint of rot, his voice calm, his demeanor steady. The room's atmosphere shifted. Board members turned pale. Some squirmed. Others looked outright stunned. "She's not maintaining standards," he said with quiet power. "She's weaponizing them. The HOA isn't a shield for order. It's become her sword of punishment, and she's swinging it at whoever displeases her. With our money. Every household here, including the one that saved my life, has paid for her vendettas." He let the words settle in the room, the air growing heavier with every breath. This was never about community. It's about control and greed. Karen arrived late, 20 minutes past the start. She marched in wearing oversized sunglasses and a baggy HOA sweatshirt like armor, broadcasting her defiance. Her mere presence disrupted the room's somber tone like a thunderclap. She stared daggers at Greg the entire time, her mouth a thin white line, her rage barely contained. When Greg finished, she couldn't hold it in. She slammed her palm onto the table, sending glasses rattling. "I trusted you, Gregory," she hissed, voice low and shaking. "You're betraying our family, our home, our entire community. You're siding with them, with the privileged." Greg didn't even blink. His expression was stone, cold and resolute. "You risked my life over a grudge," he said flatly. You used your power to settle personal scores while I was fighting for survival. You stole from this neighborhood. Whether we're married or not, what you've done is indefensible. It's criminal." And then he made his final move. Calmly, with an eerie sense of closure, he handed in his resignation from the Finance Committee. It was more than a step back. It was a severing. But before he walked away, he co-signed a motion drafted by the interim chairman to strip Karen of her presidency. The wording was concise and devastating. For gross misconduct, misuse of funds, and endangerment of a resident's welfare. The chairman, Mr. Albright, a former judge, called the vote. 9 hands went up, 0 opposed. Even the 2 members who had hesitated earlier now raised their hands, eyes lowered, faces drawn in shame. No clapping, no whispers, just a thunderous silence, the weight of reality pressing down. Karen's lip trembled. Her fists clenched, then unclenched, twitching uselessly at her sides. Her face, once flush with indignation, turned blotchy purple. A vein pulsed at her temple like it might burst. She looked around wildly, hunting for anyone to speak up, to object, to save her. But all she found were cold stares, unreadable expressions. The very people she had bullied, fined, and silenced were now unmoved spectators at her downfall. Then came the explosion. She let out a strangled, animalistic laugh, part scream, part sob. "Lies! You're all liars!" she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at each board member, accusing them like some deranged prophet. "You, Mrs. Hanley, you were late paying dues. You, David, you signed those reimbursements. Don't pretend you didn't know. This whole board is a sham, a fraud. I'll take every one of you down." Greg stood up again, calm and unflinching. "Karen, enough. It's done. I built this place. I kept it safe. Her voice hit a fever pitch, her hair frizzing at the edges, eyes blazing with madness. She was unraveling in front of them all. Mr. Albright remained composed. His tone was final. "Karen Delaney, by unanimous vote and in accordance with HOA bylaws, you are hereby removed from all governance roles within Maple Hollow, effective immediately. Your financial discrepancies will be turned over to civil court for restitution and to the state attorney for possible criminal prosecution. This session is closed." Karen froze. Her fury evaporated into panic. Criminal review. Those words echoed like a siren. She paled, then exploded. "You'll all regret this!" she shrieked, voice hoarse, pointing wildly. "All of you!" She didn't walk out. She stormed. She tore open the clubhouse doors, slamming one so hard it rebounded off the wall. One of her heels snapped, causing her to limp, barely holding her balance. Her image of elegance shattered as she cursed incoherently, a dethroned tyrant retreating from the battlefield. That night the sounds came. Glass shattering, furniture thrown, cabinet doors slamming. She was packing, screaming, flinging clothes into a suitcase, hurling documents into boxes. Her voice echoed down the block. "I hope you choke, Gregory. Next time you need CPR, I hope she lets you die." Greg didn't follow her. He didn't plead, argue, or even raise his voice. He simply sat there, motionless, in the center of what had once been their shared living room, now a whirlwind of boxes, flung open drawers, and shattered silence. The television was off, the lights dim. The only sound was Karen's chaos, her fists slamming closet doors, the angry thud of heels on hardwood, the rip of duct tape across cardboard. He watched her destroy what was left of their home with the calm of a man who'd already walked away in his heart. His expression was blank, drained, not out of coldness, but because there was nothing left to give. No anger, no love, just the ache of finality and the quiet relief of release. She cursed him. She yelled at the walls. She hurled accusations and regrets into the night like daggers. "You coward! You betrayed me for a surgeon in scrubs! You let them turn you against me!" But Greg didn't flinch, not once. His silence spoke louder than any retort. It wasn't indifference, it was resolve. And as the screech of packing tape echoed through the hallways and her frantic energy rattled every room, he remained still, listening to the sound of his marriage finally ending. And then, morning came. With the sunrise, so too came the truck. A lumbering white vehicle with scuffed metal sides and an engine that growled as it parked at the curb in front of Karen's house. The hydraulic ramp groaned downward like a drawbridge, opening not to a castle but to an exile. The movers, dressed in navy shirts and back braces, didn't speak much. They didn't have to. Box after box, piece after piece of Karen's perfectly curated life was carried out the door, her labeled storage bins, her HOA files, her vanity mirror still covered in sticky notes. The physical weight of her control, her pride, her rules, all of it was loaded into the truck and stacked like memories too heavy to carry. And the neighbors watched. From behind curtains, from porches, from cars parked along the street. Some sipped coffee, others just stood frozen, their morning routines momentarily suspended. No one waved. No one greeted the movers. It wasn't shock that held them in place. It was something else. A cautious, collective disbelief. A moment long awaited, and now finally here. You could feel it in the air, the strange stillness of an entire neighborhood exhaling after years of holding its breath. And then slowly, signs of life returned. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, children began to emerge from front doors. Bikes rolled across driveways. Sidewalk chalk dusted the pavement. Laughter returned, unrestrained, like a song that had been waiting in silence. The street no longer felt watched. It felt lived in, human. Karen Delaney, once the self-declared ruler of Maple Hollow, the woman whose word had been law and whose wrath had defined the atmosphere, was gone. Not gently, not gracefully, but completely. Banished by her own hand, her own obsession, her own insatiable need to dominate. The neighborhood she once ruled no longer looked her way with fear. It looked forward, to peace, to recovery, to normalcy. Her reign was over. And the street, still quiet but finally breathing again, would never forget the sound of her leaving.